There is a certain kind of silence that doesn't bring peace. It doesn't soothe, nor does it calm. It's the kind of silence that crawls under your skin, reminding you that something is listening, even when you think you're alone. That was the silence that clung to the old Harrington house, a decaying Victorian mansion standing at the edge of Blackwood Town, where people whispered stories about shadows moving inside, long after the windows were boarded up and the doors locked with rusted chains. They said the house wasn't empty. It was waiting. For what? No one dared to guess. Eleanor, a graduate student in folklore, never believed in such things. Legends to her were fragments of human imagination, fabricated tales to pass the long nights. But when her professor assigned her a thesis on haunted architecture, she couldn't resist. She chose Harrington House, despite every local warning. With her recorder, notebook, and a flashlight that flickered too much for comfort, she stepped through the rotting door on a gray October evening, the air thick with dampness and decay. The moment she crossed the threshold, the silence swallowed her whole. The smell of mildew and something copper-like dried blood hit her nose. She dismissed it as old pipes, rust perhaps. But her instincts told her otherwise. As she walked deeper into the house, she noticed faint patterns scratched into the wallpaper lines and marks that didn't look random, but purposeful, like words written in a language she didn't understand. Every step she took was echoed back to her, but it wasn't just an echo. It felt like the house itself was mimicking her movements, almost breathing with her. The locals had said no one stayed in Harrington House for more than a night. Some claimed to hear voices. Others swore they saw shadows with no source. Eleanor rolled her eyes at these stories until she entered what must have once been the master bedroom. The walls were stripped bare, the plaster crumbling, but there it was, the first whisper. It wasn't clear at first, just a faint hiss brushing against her ears like wind sneaking through a crack. But the room had no open windows, no drafts. The whisper grew louder, carrying syllables that twisted and warped, as though someone was speaking from behind the walls themselves. She pressed her ear against the wall and froze. It wasn't one voice. It was many. Layered, urgent, chanting something she couldn't decipher. Her recorder captured every second. But when she replayed it, her blood went cold. The whispers weren't indistinct anymore. They were words. Her name, Eleanor, again and again, spoken in 100 overlapping tones. Male, female, old, young voices that couldn't possibly all exist in that house. She shut the recorder off, her heart thundering. Rational explanations crumbled in her mind. Night fell quickly and she decided to push through, determined to prove her skepticism right. She explored the basement, a place the locals specifically warned her about. The steps groaned like dying lungs as she descended into the dark. Her flashlight flickered, fighting against the heavy blackness. Down there, the walls were different, closer, tighter, damp with something slick. When her light swept across the surface, she saw that the walls were not stone nor concrete. They looked fleshy, pulsating faintly as though veins ran underneath. She backed away, muttering that it was just mold, just rot. But then came the whisper again, clearer, sharper. This time, it didn't just say her name. It asked her a question. "Do you hear us?" Eleanor's voice cracked as she whispered back, "Who's there?" The walls shuddered as if pleased by her acknowledgement. A shadow slithered across the far side of the basement, too quick and too large to be human. She raised her flashlight, but it cut out entirely, plunging her into blackness. In that void, the whispers grew deafening, surrounding her, above and below, behind and within. She covered her ears, but it didn't matter. They weren't just sounds anymore. They were inside her head, clawing at her thoughts, demanding to be heard. We are here, let us out." She scrambled up the stairs, every step shaking as though something enormous was pursuing her. She burst back into the main hallway, gasping, clutching her chest. But the house had changed. Doors that once led to rooms now opened into endless corridors, spiraling deeper into impossible dimensions. The architecture shifted before her eyes, twisting like a labyrinth designed to trap her. The whispers guided her now. Sometimes gentle, sometimes cruel. Left, right. This way. Wrong way. They laughed when she stumbled. They cried when she tried to resist. One voice rose above the others, deeper, heavier, like the foundation of the house itself was speaking. Stay with us. She ran, but the more she fled, the more she realized she wasn't escaping. She was descending. Every turn took her lower, deeper, until she was in a chamber that couldn't exist within the physical space of the house. The ceiling stretched endlessly upward, the walls lined with what she first thought were carvings, till she looked closer. They were faces. Countless human faces, screaming silently from within the stone, eyes bulging, mouths twisted in agony. Their features pressed outward, as though trapped beneath a thin layer of wall. Every whisper she had heard was theirs. The deeper voice spoke again. Now you see. Now you belong. The faces began to move, their eyes rolling toward her, mouths opening in unison to chant her name. The floor beneath her pulsed like a living organ, and cracks split open, revealing skeletal hands clawing their way out. Eleanor dropped her recorder, which hit the ground and continued to roll, capturing every horrific sound. She tried to scream, but the whispers filled her throat, stealing her voice. The walls surged forward, and she felt her body being pulled, absorbed, dragged into the surface. Her fingernails scraped against plaster as she clawed desperately, leaving trails of blood, but it was no use. The faces welcomed her, stretching, pulling her into their ranks. Her final thought was that she would become just another whisper in the walls. Days later, when the professor noticed Eleanor hadn't returned, he called the authorities. The police broke into Harrington House, expecting to find evidence of squatters, or perhaps nothing at all. Instead, they found her recorder. They played it back in the precinct, and at first it was only static. Then came the voices, hundreds of them. And among them, clear, chilling, and unmistakable, was Eleanor's voice, whispering from somewhere deep inside the walls. Don't come here. Don't listen. Too late. The officers turned it off immediately, disturbed beyond reason. The case was closed as missing person, resolved. But in Blackwood, the legend of Harrington House grew darker. The townsfolk said the whispers had grown louder, carrying Eleanor's name along with the others. And those who dared to walk past the house at night swore they heard someone new crying for help from within, her voice blending with the chorus. They never went near again. The house still waits, its silence pressing against the town, its whispers eager for more. And if you ever find yourself standing before its rotting doors, and you think you hear your name from inside, do not listen. For once the house speaks to you, it never lets you go.